Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FTX podcast. I'm your host, Tristan Ivor, and today I have the pleasure of having with me Matthew Graham, the founder and CEO of Sino Global Capital. Welcome.
Great to be with you here today, Tristan.
Yeah, I'm glad. This is long overdue. I've been very curious about you guys. I have a lot of projects that I speak with that say you guys are strong and good investors. So good to have you on. To get things kicked off, Matt, would you mind giving me a background on yourself and maybe a bit of the story of how you ended up in China?
Sure. So how I ended up in China is quite simple. It's really the same impetus that led me to crypto. It's wanting to be at the center of the action, at the center of dynamic change, and to be focused on things that excite me and fascinate me every day. So after B school, I took a job and eventually led all the international business for a Beijing-based VC. I'm fluent in Mandarin, so that was a natural fit. I'm self-taught, fluent in Mandarin. After kind of reaching my ceiling, leading that international arm of a prominent Beijing VC, I started Sino Global. And initially, we were focused on sell-side investment banking, representing international best-of-breed technology companies in China for strategic partnerships and investment on a bespoke basis. But the concept was always that we would develop organically one or more sector competencies over time. And very quickly, I had been following Bitcoin for years before that. This is in 2015. In fact, in 2013, with my investment banking hat on, I actually pitched one of the biggest telecommunication companies in China on having a Bitcoin-focused phone specifically for Bitcoin power users. Of course, at that time, it was too early, so they basically laughed me out of the room. It didn't go well, that presentation. But anyway, so we had been following, I had been following for a long time, and we post Ethereum. This was something that was a dramatically bigger story, and we fell in love with the space. At that point, I was making angel investments in blockchain, and they were going, let's say, extremely well. So we quickly pivoted from investment banking hat to investor hat. We write strategic checks. We invest in the best blockchain projects in the world. And then we help our portfolio companies in mainland China, which is arguably the most important market in crypto. And it certainly is among the major markets. It's the most impenetrable, even for best of breed international projects. It's really quite a unique market. So that's what we do.
One of the things you said there, I found sort of fascinating, Matthew, which is, you said you're self-taught Mandarin, right? And yes. I know forcing yourself to learn a language is one of the hardest things in the world, I think, or I don't know if in the world, but it's one of the most difficult things because it takes so much discipline and time and diligence. And I'd love to hear what made you take all that time upon yourself to learn it?
Well, I would say a surfeit of ambition. Frankly, I hate languages. I don't like languages. I'm a math guy, really. In my view, this was a big bet that I was making. And it's not, 1997. If you're going to build a business in China, you can't just come here and be like, oh, I'm the guy from Connecticut. Let's do. I mean, it's not like it used to be where you could come over and not have extensive domain expertise. You got to do it the right way. I embarked on a very intensive course of self-study, and I reading Chinese history, about Chinese culture, and then put in quite literally thousands of hours studying Mandarin, which I hated every minute of. I'm not a languages guy. I don't like languages. I really don't. But in my mind, I was making a big long-term bet. And if you do something like that, you got to do it the right way. So, very similar to when we decided to focus on blockchain, and I also embarked on an extensive and, of course, still ongoing, because it's such a dynamic market, but an extensive regime of self-study. These are just things you have to do to be a serious player.
Can you walk me through that as well? So you left this investment firm in Beijing to start your own blockchain focused company. And I'd love to hear first why you decided on it being blockchain focused. And then I've seen this picture of you sleeping on the floor on Twitter when you guys were getting set up and started. And yeah, I'd love to hear a bit of the inception story behind all this.
So the blockchain focus was not day one. Initially, we represented international technology companies that needed the bespoke experience. We represented them here in China for strategic partnership and investment. So effectively, that's sell-side investment banking. So for example, we represented one of the best carbon nanotube companies in the world, was one of our key early clients. It's a Luxembourg-based company, but actually it's Russian scientists that live in Australia with a massive tech center in Novosibirsk. So initially, and now it's a huge billion-dollar company. That was one of our earliest clients. They've gone on to become an enormous success in that very specialized field. They're probably the world leader. But at any rate, first we focused on a bespoke tech banking experience. You know, the framework, the view from day one was that we would let things develop organically, and we would go from a broad-based focus tech for China, and we would start to specialize over time, but we wanted it to happen naturally. But you know, again, I had been following Bitcoins since 2010 and increasingly active after 2013. I remember in 2013, I took a meeting with Li Xiaolai. He was and possibly still is the biggest Bitcoin holder in China. So I wanted to pick his brain and make sure I understood the lay of the land. So I had been following the market for a long time. And then post Ethereum, it was just very clear that this was something that was enormously bigger than the initial Bitcoin story. And that this was, it was clear to me that we were talking about something that was as big as the internet, which was the previous biggest thing I had ever seen in my life. To be in the most dynamic region and be focusing on the biggest thing, in my view, since the internet, that was just, you know, it was a no-brainer, basically. So it was really that post-Ethereum inflection when it was clear to me that this was a far bigger story than it had been before.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, seems like your core competencies from before must have translated really well as well to these new sort of blockchain companies as well. And on that topic, so you know, Ethereum was the main thing when you guys were starting all of this, and there's been quite a development over time. Has your investment thesis remained the same? Has it shifted? How do you guys look at the space that's evolving so rapidly?
So that's always a big challenge. One of the biggest challenges that we have. My basic, there are people that do really, really well with a different approach. Certainly multi-chain comes immediately to mind. They are a very thesis-driven shop. However, in my view, in our approach, not necessarily better or worse, but different, is that this market is so dynamic that we try very, very hard to not get trapped into rigid long-term investment theses. We try to have a much more nimble, dynamic, agile approach. And that gives us a lot of benefits. For example, this cycle of NFTs, everyone knew about CryptoKitties and such, but this cycle of NFTs, we were one of the first companies that wrote a big check for NFT platforms this cycle. And so Mintbase will be launching on Near in the next few weeks. And we think it's going to be an absolute blockbuster development when they finally really open up to the public. So point being, though, if we didn't have that open, agile approach, I think we would take a longer time to have an understanding of new market developments. So instead, what we don't compromise on, so we have areas where we're very open-minded, but then we have other areas where we're quite rigid. And so where we don't compromise is on the type of people that we invest in. And so we have certain things that we look for. A lot of them, frankly, are more qualitative, but we look for people that have clearly differentiated approach, but they're doing things in a very long-term way. Frequently, they have more traditional backgrounds, but then they're like half crypto crazy. We look for people that are really half-half. And we spend a lot of time doing DD such that we feel comfortable that it's an extremely high trust relationship where we really ask ourselves, is this someone that we would want to be hanging out with, literally for years? And so I think we're one of the investors that really are most focused on this long-term approach. And I like to think that we were one of the first investors, certainly in the China market, that realized that it's not like this lapan. Lapan is the Chinese word for pump. It's not like the pump the plate. It's not like this 2017, pump and dump, all this craziness, and the tokens have no real value, and everything is just about moving pieces around so you can ultimately end up with more Bitcoin. I think we were one of the first investors that said, wait, hold on, what if we do kind of like the opposite of that? And we look for, and we start with the thesis that there are some companies that are creating real value here and for the long term. And we try to find those companies, and we try to build these long-term relationships. And then it's a super easy sell because we say, look, we're going to help you in China. You have to do it. It's really hard, and you probably you should know that you can't do it yourself, and that would be a big headache. And we will help build out that piece for you as a strategic investor. I mean, that's our basic sell, right?
Yeah, and it's quite effective. Yeah. I mean, I speak to a lot of teams, and definitely when they start asking about China focus, I mention you guys just because the teams that have worked with you already give good feedback on that front. So kudos to that. It's being represented across the field. Before I ask
we're actually pretty excited because so previously the view was that we targeted as at a minimum dedicating half of our resources across the team towards supporting our existing portfolio companies. We're keeping that, but actually we're rolling out a suite of services starting with marketing, PR, and communications. So now, in addition to our venture capitalist team dedicating half the resources, we have function experts. So we brought in Sally, who comes from Token Insight and has a very rich marketing background and a crypto and deep crypto knowledge. And she's going to lead our marketing efforts on behalf of our portfolio companies. And the concept then is that we will develop more and more function experts so that we can have a full suite of service providers. We can have even, for example, dedicated HR. Many of our portfolio companies need a China GM, which is a very difficult hire, things like that.
One thing I'd like to ask you before I start going into sort of your thoughts on different chains and projects and stuff like that is, how has your team evolved over time? Well, now you're speaking of this new aspect that's being built out, but before that, say from when you started to the last 6 months, how did that work? Was it all you and a couple people, or have you been expanding quite rapidly?
We've never had a huge team. I've always had a traditional hedge fund view or VC view. Really, I'm more familiar with the hedge space by way of hedge fund space by way of my background. But I always have a point is that I've always had more of a traditional view where that you don't need a big army. What you need is a small number of Navy SEALs.
Agreed.
So we've never had dozens of people, anything like that. We've got 13 right now. We've expanded a little bit, but I don't need an army. I need amazing people.
I mean, that's big I think 13 is quite big for a venture fund, right?
Yeah, that includes like admin. We have some local investor relations type people that includes all in.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like still quite a bit of growth from those first days with that picture of you sleeping on the floor.
Absolutely. Forward growth, no question about that. Not as much in the size of the team, but certainly in the size of the AUM. It's been quite torrid growth, and it's almost all permanent capital. So that gives us a lot of advantages in and of itself. Carl was talking about that. Carl from Three Arrows was talking about that the other day. That gives us huge advantages over other VCs because we have no pressure to invest or not invest or do this or that. We can take positions for literally years if we feel comfortable. If the market gets too frothy, we just don't play. If everyone else is crying because it's a bear market or whatever, and capital is drying up, perfect. We can be more aggressive. That gives us a lot of advantages.
Makes sense. And now I want to get down to your thought processes on some of these things, because I know you have really good insights. And I guess I'd like to start with Bitcoin. Matt, how do you think about Bitcoin?
That's really starting at the 10,000 foot view here. Okay.
How do I think high level view? Someone that you respect but doesn't know anything about crypto is asking you, what is Bitcoin? What do you tell them?
Yeah. I get a lot of questions like this from my family actually all the time. What's this Doge thing all about? How do you think about Bitcoin? Things like that. I'm not sure I'm necessarily good at answering these questions, types of questions. To me, Bitcoin was one of the most extraordinary developments of my life that I've seen happen in the marketplace. I remember I went down the rabbit hole, must have been like 2011, 2012. I'm like, there's got to be a way to figure out who this guy is. I just thought it was I still do. I think it's the world's most interesting problem. I think it's amazing that we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. There are Hal Finney theories, there are a lot of theories, but to me, it's just absolutely extraordinary that we don't know that. To me, Bitcoin is simultaneously the least interesting thing about crypto and one of the most extraordinary creations of my lifetime. It's an entirely new way of thinking about money that merged several different disciplines, such as cryptography. To me, I'm very much the opposite of a maximalist. I really it's the post Ethereum story that I'm not a gold guy. I'm not even necessarily a store of value guy. I'm not a Austrian economics guy. I don't have much in common with the Bitcoin maximalist crowd at all in really any way. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's something. It was a breathtaking development that set the stage for potentially upending wide swaths of traditional finance.
Makes sense. And then I know you're probably a lot more interested about Ethereum and the subsequent chains and things that came out after that. How was your thought process around Ethereum?
Sure. When the concept of Ethereum and adding intelligence to money, that is breathtaking to me. And so it's almost like I'll never forget when that hit, because I know a lot of people have the same feeling about when they first read the Bitcoin white paper. But for me, when it first hit that you could now add intelligence to money, you could have programmable money, you could have smart contracts, all of these things. To me, that moment when that hit was breathtaking. And in fact, it was actually life-changing.
Would you mind diving a bit deeper into that?
Well, I bet my firm on it. I changed the direction of Sino and decided to go as deep as I could. It wasn't necessarily like a specific moment in time when an apple fell on my, it wasn't like a 5-second moment in time where I was like, eureka, holy shit. But it was more like a brief window of time when I had this realization and decided to pivot Sino and to focus solely on this extraordinary capability. I wish it was more like a eureka moment. That'd be a cooler story, but it was more like a brief window in time.
Well, it's an extended eureka moment, right? Because of that decision, exactly. You're now where you are. So it seems to have turned out well in any case. So I guess the one I'm interested in, just because I'm so involved in it personally, is the Solana ecosystem. And you've been one of the strongest investors in this ecosystem. You've been really active since very early on. How did you get looped into this in the first place? Where did your attention get drawn to when you saw it first?
Frankly, we first flagged it on, basically day zero of Serum. We first flagged it, and then I put, after we made our Serum investment, and then I put everything aside to learn everything I could about Solana, and was pretty much blown away. And so it kind of started from there, and getting to know totally. These are our type of people. They have something that's cleanly differentiated that seems to not be fully appreciated in the marketplace yet. And it really just ticked all our boxes, because we never been an Ethereum maximalist, but we also, from day zero, never subscribed to the Ethereum killer narrative. To us, it always seemed obvious that Ethereum would be a gorilla, no pun intended, for years to come. They have an enormous developer moat. They're the incumbent, but they're a strong incumbent with legs. It's not a incumbent creating.
Yeah, it's no dinosaur
vulnerability scenario. It's not like a Blockbuster video scenario. So for us, it was always obvious that Ethereum would be the big guy in the room for years to come. And we started from that, and then from that. That was our starting point. And then we thought about, okay, so Ethereum is our everyday car. That's kind of like the default. That's our Volvo or whatever. There are some issues with it that may or may not be, that to a greater or lesser extent are long-term in nature or short-term in nature, such as gas fees, things like that. But that's kind of our starting point. That's our Volvo. It's a good car. It's not a perfect car, but for most use cases, that's our weekday car. And then the question is, what other kind of cars do you need? And so for us, Solana this is your extreme car. So this is your car for when you have extreme use cases, especially in fintech, and you need to have extremely high TPS or extremely low cost. And that opens up a whole new design space that you can do a wide variety of things that fundamentally weren't possible with your weekend car. And it's difficult to think of something that is more cleanly differentiated in the marketplace with respect at least to L1 chains. We have a thesis that we subscribe very strongly to, and that is a major part of our investment process. And that thesis is that we always look for what we call internally super fans. So we look for these power users or super fans, and our basic thought process is that most projects will never have even one super fan. You'll have people that use it, people that are kind of ambivalent about it, whatever, I'm gonna use this, but I'm not in love with it. But our process, our thought process, our thesis, our approach is that you'll almost never get even one. If a project gets 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 7, that's the hard part. If you get 4 or 7, you can definitely get hundreds. And if you definitely get hundreds, you can get thousands or more. But almost no one will ever get even one. And a super fan would be, I don't know. I mean, I'm obsessed with wrestling. I need my coffee, things like that. That's where you just, Chinese pod is how I learned Mandarin. So I'm obsessed with Chinese pod software. There are Apple super fans, right? People that just are obsessed with Apple products. You'll almost never get even one. In the early stage, what we want to see is if you even have 3, then we believe you can get hundreds. So we'll take a close look and quite likely we'll invest.
Your investment makes so much more sense now.
Yeah. So I want to see obsessive people. I'm an obsessive person. I want to see people that are obsessed about a project. And most projects will never have them. But if you can get 1 or 2, you can get hundreds, then thousands, then more. So in a very large sense, Sam was Solana's first super fan. And so for us, this was an indication that it's one thing to have very sexy technology that looks amazing and a world-class team that are working on something cleanly differentiated. That's all fucking fantastic, but it's not necessarily even enough for us. We want to see these super fans. So when Sam came in with Serum, Sam's typical bold, change the world vision. This was Solana's first super fan, and at that point it became extremely investable for us. And we started accumulating quite heavily. Frankly, haven't stopped.
Well, it's great to have you aboard. Honestly, I mean, I'm a Serum super fan, and I'm making sure it gets plugged in as many places as possible. And
absolutely.
On that note, would you like share some of these investments in the Solana ecosystem that stand out to you, and maybe the reasons that they did?
Sure. So we have invested throughout the Solana ecosystem in terms of projects that have a long-term vision, but also obviously the right kind of teams we look for. But then it's a very frothy market right now, so we're quite cognizant. We try to be more aggressive in a bear market and less aggressive in a bull market relative to anyone else. I want to kind of keep it cool, be on an even keel. But of course, Bonfida and Maps and Oxygen are some big investments for us. I think you've seen many people have seen our Cope investment. I have to say, I've always, because I'm an information vacuum cleaner to a point that's kind of, the word obsessive comes to mind again. So I always lurk in these discords and I read everything kind of like a psychopath. But Cope is the first Discord where I've actually actively participated. They're fun, man. I really like the Cope gang. Those are some examples of where we've invested in the Solana ecosystem. Of course, I didn't mention Serum because that's you had already mentioned it. That's our biggest, boldest, and most confident bet that we're most excited about in the Solana ecosystem. And we have one more that is not announced yet, but we are super excited about that as well. We actually have, I counted it before the podcast, we have six announcements that we're sitting on for the next 4 to 6 weeks. At least 3 of those are blockbuster announcements. So by the time this podcast lands, the timing will be quite fortuitous, I think. So one of the 6 big announcements, 3 are legit blockbusters. One of the 3 blockbusters is a new Solana ecosystem investment.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, but for me personally, Bonfida is one of my favorite projects within the space by far. There's bias there because I know the founder personally, but
he's cool, right? I like him a lot.
Oh man, just
smart.
Hella smart. 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, never stops. Yep. Team is amazing. Developers are amazing. Building out sort of this infrastructure layer for the rest of the Solana ecosystem. They're becoming the smart contract pros that everyone else wants to sort of use their pieces. They're building out perps. So super bullish.
I legitimately think they are quite underrated still, in my view.
Yep.
Absolute baller team. He started at Alameda, I think, right?
Yeah, a while ago, and then he left, and then he started his own thing. Yep.
Funny story about FIDA. So crypto social, right? It's different than TradFi. And so I always actually used to be quite buttoned up and conservative. I've always been an extreme person, but I used to be pretty conservative. So crypto social though, right? So I've allowed myself to have a louder personality. But so the point is that because we have a very well-defined voice, that's a very unique voice and style, we frequently get very idiosyncratic pitches. Like when someone sends us a pitch deck, they'll also send us something. Could be, something related to our very unique personality. And the point is that FIDA was actually one of the first ones we got. And so FIDA, one of the members of the FIDA team, happens to be one of the best power lifters in Singapore. So I remember quite vividly in my DMs on Twitter, I didn't know him. It was a cold DM. He said, "Hey, if my deadlift is at least X% higher than yours, will you take a call?" And then he sent me a video of him deadlifting. And I don't remember the exact amount, but it was nuts. It was crazy, way higher than me. So it was a member of the FIDA team. And it turns out, I think, in fact, he was top 3 in Singapore, or maybe even number 1 in Singapore in his weight class for deadlifting. So that was the start of some of the idiosyncratic approaches that we get. He sent us a video of him deadlifting, and he said, if this is more than what you can do, will you take a call?
That resonated with you, huh?
Well, so look, I mean, I'm only human, right? I try not to let it resonate with me, actually. I mean, I will take a call on that. If someone has balls, I'm more likely to take a call with them. That's true. But of course, in terms of investment decisions and things like this, we don't take it into account. But do we love it? Yeah, we definitely love it.
Yeah, I mean, right, you have to balance in that human factor into all the sort of quantitative side.
I'll say it like this. It does not affect investment decisions, but it can make it more likely that we'll take a meeting. That's true.
You heard it here first, folks. Can you talk to me a little bit about wrestling?
I'm only human.
Do you get a chance to still wrestle in China? Like, I don't know, is that a big sport there? Is it happening?
It's not, unfortunately. But there was the whole Dubai boxing, and I tried to get in on that. And so originally the organizer for Dubai boxing, he was going to talk to the venue and try to have wrestling too. But apparently for, I don't know, insurance or whatever reason, they vetoed it. I was going to wrestle one of the partners from Delphi Digital, who is a BJJ black belt. So we had a big plan. But unfortunately, apparently it's not going to happen. But I've been inspired by this. So our new initiative, this is true, is I decided that for China, we're in the United States, Europe, and Asia. So for China-based team members, I decided that as a perk, you could have MMA instruction. So I hired as a coach a guy who was a 2-time national wrestling champion in Iran, which is one of the very strongest wrestling nations.
Yeah.
If you're a national champ in Iran, you're definitely world class. So I hired him as a coach, and so we're having personal instruction that'll start probably this coming week for MMA. So that's our new perk, and it was inspired by Dubai wrestling. But I'm very disappointed because I was really looking forward to talking an enormous amount of shit.
We'll have to see if we can get Mo to plan something out. I'll ping Mo and be like, dude, come on, we need to see Matthew in the ring.
Yeah, I even ordered all new gear and anything. You know how I'm a passion driven guy, so I ordered all new wrestling gear and all this stuff. But apparently, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, for me it's surfing, but I'd love to get more.
Oh, surfing, okay.
I'd love to get more in touch with sort of martial art sort of disciplines as well. I think there's a ton of value in that. You know who's actually really good at all this is Zane. Do you know Zane Tackett?
I do know Zane.
Yeah,
I don't know him super well, but of course I know Zane. He seems very cool.
Yeah,
is he a wrestler? I forget.
Yeah, he wrestled growing up, and then jiu-jitsu guy, kickboxing, Muay Thai. He's super plugged into all of that. Actually, we went to Antigua last year to do some stuff in our office there, and
I remember.
We hung out with Roger Veer, who had flown out a bunch of UFC and MMA fighter guys to train him because he's a jiu-jitsu guy as well.
I remember he did that. Yeah.
So we all got to sort of spar with these UFC fighters and get our asses kicked.
Is Roger any good? Is it good?
Oh yeah, he's good.
You can't say. I kind of want to fight Roger.
He's good. He's quite good. I don't know his belt and stuff, but he was definitely holding his own against these guys.
I don't know him, but you know me, and that doesn't stop me. So I randomly called. I do remember I randomly called him out one day on Twitter. I'm sure he was like, who the fuck is this guy? But I randomly was like, hey, I heard you fight, so we should fight.
He probably liked that, honestly. Like from what he's like, all right, let's do some wrestling, some jiu-jitsu here.
Yeah. The thing is, I just don't want to do head stuff. So that's the thing. That's why I don't want to do boxing in Dubai, because I refuse to do blows to the head. I just think it's too long-term dangerous. because I know myself, like if I started doing that, then I would want to do it like all the time. And then I'd be boxing on the weekends, and then it's just too dangerous. So that's my blocker with all the combat sports. It can't be anything to the head.
Yeah, fair enough. You protect that beautiful brain for the rest of our lives, right?
I just, knowing me, I can't do stuff halfway. I'm either like not gonna do it, or I'm in all the way. So I can't.
Yeah,
I can't
I saw you knock out the person. I'm not gonna wrestle you, Matthew. Lots of
yeah, I have to say, when I announced that we would have this new perk, MMA, Dermot's first question was, wait, do I have to wrestle you? What does this mean effectively? And I didn't have to say, no one will have to wrestle me, and it's an optional perk. I had to be very clear about that. Our HR manual was going to be voluminous.
Everyone's going to be complaining. I have a question for you, Matt. Like, what do you think? So if you're looking at the Solana ecosystem right now, right? What do you think are some of the pieces that are still missing here, that opportunities for people that could come in and do some valuable stuff?
Sure. So at a high level, I think that Serum, obviously aside, and a few other projects aside, a lot of what we are doing currently is replicating things on the Ethereum chain. And that's super important. That definitely needs to happen. But at a high level, what I'm most excited about is Solana, as Sam famously first recognized, with its TPS and its low transaction cost, opens up an entirely new design space, and it opens up the opportunity to have applications that are not even possible in any pragmatic way on Ethereum. So I'm most excited about the new design space. Now, look, I recognize that it's quite logical that the focus hasn't, Serum aside, the focus for the most part hasn't been on the new design space, because there's low-hanging fruit, right? So you got to have Phantom to upgrade the wallet side. You got, new tooling and things like that. You got all kinds of pieces that you need to fill in, things that you need to replicate that are available on Ethereum, et cetera. All that's super important. All that's investable for us. But what I'm really most excited is new design space stuff. One thing also I've been thinking about recently is, 2017, we rejected so many projects because we thought they were unrealistic, or obviously the most common rejection was, well, this is clearly just someone taking advantage of the market froth and they're not serious in a long-term way. So we threw it in the garbage can. After that category, the most common was, this is too early, not realistic, doesn't make sense. I think many projects that fall in 2017 fall into that second bucket. I think actually they deserve a revisit. Many of those were too early and didn't make sense on Ethereum, but could make sense on Solana. And I think some of those types of projects crashed and burned so famously that I think people are scared to revisit some of the ideas because they were truly terrible ideas in 2017 on Ethereum, but that doesn't mean that they're bad ideas in 2021 on Solana. So they're at a high level, I would say new design space is the most interesting thing to me, and it could include revisiting ideas that crashed and burned previously.
Yeah, I think that could actually be super valuable, and there's probably a lot of thought put into things that just may have not worked at that time that work now. For me personally, I think there's two things that I'm the most excited about. Obviously, as you were saying, all the things that are being sort of replicated from Ethereum because they're the core financial primitives, and they sort of allow
super important. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with composability, they allow all the functionalities you need for DeFi. But another part of this that I'm really excited for is, one is gaming, which I think Solana has a really good edge for, and two is real world applications back-ended by Solana in a way that the user doesn't even know they're interacting with the blockchain. I think those two 100%. Have huge scale.
100%. Fully agree. So with respect to the first, actually, we've been doing a lot of thinking about that lately. I'm very transparent. You can almost kind of see me going through my thought process. I'm not a gamer. I've never been a gamer, so I don't know much about this space. I'm not even sure I necessarily need to, because we invest in platform plays and we look for, super fans that can tell us what's sexy. We don't necessarily need to understand it to appreciate it. rather in the way a user would. In other words, when we invest in MintBase as an NFT platform, I don't know shit about digital art. I don't. I have a terrible artistic eye, like truly horrible. So I'm never going to be like, oh, this people is worth more than the other people's because X, Y, Z. I'm never going to understand any of that. But what I can understand is a platform play and user adoption. So anyway, that leads back to gaming. I'm not a gamer and I'll never really get it. But I have been spending a lot of time on metaverse research lately, as has the team. So you can see me going through my okay, I'm ordering VR gear. Anybody got recommendations, things like that. So I fully agree that that's an interesting space, and we've been spending a lot of time researching that. And then the second thing that you alluded to, real world applications on the back end that to a user, they might not even know are blockchain or crypto under the hood. One of the interesting things is that blockchain for business and government really got ice cold overseas. It has been, and it continues to be red hot in China. So it's just kind of an interesting backdrop that because the Chinese government has kind of anointed blockchain as a strategic technology in the same way that AI and 5G are. So they are, it's so many contradictions in China, but in some ways it's a very top-down economy. And so they almost kind of like mobilize resources around themes. And one of those themes being blockchain, it's in the 5-year plan, et cetera, et cetera. So there's enormous top-down pressure and incentives on state-owned enterprises, governments, but also ostensibly private sector companies to be researching and testing all kinds of blockchain for business and government initiatives. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of interesting that China and the West are really in a very different place with regards to blockchain for business.
Makes perfect sense. And one team there on the gaming side, or there's actually 2 games I'm pretty excited about. Maybe you could take a look at with your team as well. And I'd love your feedback.
Sure, I'd love to hear.
One is
games? I'm going to take notes.
One is Open Era by the Open Dive team. And the reason, well, 2 reasons.
We know Open Dive, yeah.
Oh, you know those guys? Okay. 1, the team is phenomenal. And 2, they're building something very similar to RuneScape. And RuneScape is probably the game that has the most super fans that I know of. I'm personally a super fan of RuneScape, even though I haven't played in years. So I think they have huge market fit right there. And they'll off the bat
so
have a bunch of...
RuneScape is like a whole interactive world. It's not like a shooter game. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. You have, I don't know, 60 different skills that you can level up. And there's a lot of commerce and interactions on a chat level with each other in groups. It's very similar to crypto, actually, except in a gamified form.
I'll tell you something. This is going to date me so bad, but I'm going to share this with you. I believe, I would have to think about it for sure, but I believe the last game that I played was probably Oregon Trail. Have you heard about that game?
I have not. What is that?
It's like so okay, look, when I was very, very young, because if someone looks up this game, then they'll be able to date me a little bit. So I'd like to be clear that I was very young at this point in time. Otherwise you'll think I'm like 97 years old. So it was a game that you played on like a fucking Apple II or whatever. So we at school, when I was very young, in middle school or whatever, elementary school. In elementary school, we had Apple IIs in the classroom, I guess it was. And it was this shitty little game where you had to adventure game, and you had to go along Oregon Trail, from American history, right? The first settlers or whatever. So you were a settler, you had your horse and buggy or whatever, and you had to make decisions along the way. And then certain things would happen, like a flash flood, and you'd lose supplies or whatever. And so you had your health points and things like that, and you would have to survive all the way to Oregon, something like that. So that was the last game I played, I think. And again, if you look this up, it was at one point a very, very famous game. But I again would like to emphasize that I was very, very young. This was in elementary school.
And then the other one, I'll have to look that up. Actually, it sounds familiar. I feel that I may know.
Very famous back in the day. Almost certainly before you were born.
The other one is the Aurora folks, which they're a team of traditional game builders, but they're actually full bore coming into crypto space, bringing on some blockchain engineers to tie it into all their traditional gaming infrastructure that they know how to do very well. They're doing a really interesting thing where they'll have NFTs and NFT staking, and they're basically what
Aurora?
Aurori, Aurory. Yeah, they already launched their Twitter as well, and both OpenAera and Aurori already have their Twitters out.
Literally taking notes.
But yeah, what makes me really bullish on this is the phenomena you've seen on Axie Infinity, which is that people are actually making a living from these games. It's the fact that it's blockchain based and you have NFTs that have real world value allow people to immerse themselves and create real value from the game in a direct manner. I mean, this has happened for a long time in other games, like World of Warcraft Gold has been a huge market. RuneScape Gold has been a huge market.
Steve Bannon had a China-based business based on World of Warcraft mining.
Exactly. And the only thing was the selling of these was illegal for the game. You had to go to black market sites and you'd get scammed all the fucking time. And it was a pain in the ass. But now you have games where it's actually encouraged for there to be marketplaces, and Serum is going to be that marketplace. So I think it's just going to open this whole new dynamic around gaming.
I love it.
Really
excited. As long as I don't have to play the games. I think I just don't understand. I just don't get it. I don't get it. I'm too on the spectrum to understand, I think.
But yeah, those ones I'm really excited about. And then, Matt, so I don't take too much of your time, I have one more question for you. And this is a bit more on the personal level, but you've done a lot of things. You've been in different parts of the world, assimilated different cultures. Are there any lessons that have really stood out to you that have allowed you to do this in a better way, to live a better life?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think that's a very difficult question. So in terms of interacting with different cultures and things like that?
In general, like if there's one thing that stood out to you that has made you live a better life, does something come to mind?
Okay, so I'll tell you one. Maybe because of my strict religious upbringing, but I always started for many years with the default assumption that if you were having too much fun, that means you were leaving something on the table. I always thought that. So I always started with the in the back of my mind had the thought that fun and success were somehow inversely correlated, and that if you were letting yourself have too much fun, that was going to have a lot of costs for how successful you were. And that, I gotta tell you, that's definitely fucking not true. So that's something that was a big lesson for me that took a long time to learn. But there are a lot of things, you learn, I used to always try to sleep less. You can't do that. You gotta fucking sleep. You gotta sleep. At one point when I was a young man, I tried to train my body to only get by on 4 hours of sleep. God damn, that was a fucking disaster. Look, you gotta sleep. You gotta take care of your health. I think that you gotta play the long game in all aspects of your life. These are, as a person who almost kind of by default is a very extreme person and even obsessive and such, I think those were very hard lessons for me to learn, but they're definitely fucking true. You gotta play the long game with respect to health and sleep and stuff like that. For sure, it was a big kind of life misunderstanding that somehow success and fun are inversely correlated. That is definitely not true.
I agree. I'm having a blast. I'm having an absolute blast in this crypto land.
Yeah, me too.
Sweet, Matt. Well, thanks so much for coming on, man. Great. This was really fun.
Thanks so much, Tristan.
Bye. Have a good one.